Hi, this is Timothy Alcorn. I am here with Councilmember Phan. Councilmember Phan, you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. This is your council member, Anthony Phan. Thank you so much to my good friend, Tim Alcorn, Milpitas Tim. He's in the house. He's offered very kindly to have me on his program. So looking forward to having a very candid conversation with our Milpitas community.
Oh, perfect. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself past the fact that you're a council member, because I think most people in Milpitas know that, but like, what are some of your hobbies? What do you do for fun?
Yeah, well, my hobbies include being your councilman.
What a political answer.
Nothing brings me more joy and fun than to stay up to midnight at the city hall chambers discussing the important issues that affect everyday residents. What do I do for fun? I am very much a do-it-yourself kind of guy. So if I find stuff on Pinterest and whatnot that I can use the tools in my garage to make or fix up something, that's always something I try to do on my what little time off I actually get. So.
I'm kind of the same way. I think we've had a few conversations about working on cars and stuff, and
yeah,
all that. That's cool. I'm gonna expose you here. You're a total cat person, aren't you?
I am. Yeah. I have five. I can't say it on air. You'll probably have their expletives. 5 little
cats. You have 5
cats. I have 5 cats, and yeah, I believe that's the term humans use. They're running around bothering me all the time, but they are the highlight of my day.
You have 5? I didn't know you had 5.
I have 5 right now.
Oh my god!
One of them is pregnant, so we'll probably be seeing more.
Oh man, you're the crazy.
Yeah, she figured, hey, it's COVID-19. What else to do but to
oh my gosh,
spend time with loved ones.
It's a very PG way of putting it.
Hey, I expect a baby boom. 9 months from now.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've heard that from. A lot of people are actually expecting that. That's very interesting to me. Well, anyways, so I had this question kind of more towards the end, but since we're talking about it, what's your general take on this COVID-19 coronavirus stuff? Like, how is it hitting the city, the county, the nation? Like, just what are your general thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's undoubtedly affected everything, and I mean that in a very broad context, but almost in a very literal context as well. It's affected every aspect of policy, of the economy, of society as we know it. It's you go back 4 years ago, and the thing everybody was talking about was Donald Trump. Talk of the town, of the country, of the world this year is
whether it was
COVID-19.
Positive or negative. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and I mean they. The two viruses share similarities, but certainly one is.
I like what you did there. I see that. Oh, that was clever.
Well, but in all seriousness, it's affected um, our community, um, and when it did, um, I realized that it can hit a lot closer to home. The moment when I realized that, we have um, members of our staff that have tested positive, right? And it appears that the number has been, increasing. Um, it's definitely um, troubling, but I'm hopeful that advancements are being made, and that we can get back to society as we know it. Because I'm sure all of you are eager to get back to reality, or I guess maybe not all of you. I'm sure some of you appreciate the break, but
The coronacation
yeah.
for some people.
For some people, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm like, in all seriousness though, like the people that are struggling because they are out of work, that they um don't have means in terms of income, I'm really hoping that we sort this thing as quick as possible.
It's kind of crazy. I was having a conversation a couple of days ago, and the thing came up. It said back to normal, but it's not going to be normal. It's going to be what is the new normal, because this is kind of worldwide changed everything,
Right.
Permanently. I don't think there's any going back to the way uh, things were. I think a small thing that is going to change, but it'll, no one would ever have thought that this would change. Is I honestly think and kind of hope that shaking hands is no longer like a thing people do. People just don't shake hands anymore, and I'm actually kind of hope, because if you think about it, shaking hands has always been a little gross. Um, but it's like,
animals don't do it.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But no, it's definitely been hitting a lot of people really hard, and we're kind of waiting on, as of right now when this is recorded, we're waiting on Congress to pass some sort of relief bill that will hopefully help people out. But that's kind of a band-aid on what's really going on.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from all of this.
Oh yeah. Like, who's essential?
Yeah.
What's crazy is no one realized how important people who work in grocery shops, like grocery stores. People didn't realize how important those workers were until now.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's the majority of the people who are allowed to work. And I think,
definitely.
And I think another crazy thing is now people are a lot more people realize the risk that first responders put themselves in, the risk that they take just to do their job every day. Because, like we have this COVID-19 that's going around right now, but they're always in contact with people who could be really sick with something life-threatening that's contagious. That's always a possibility. People just kind of realize it right now. But no, this is it's crazy. A lot of the times when something is happening worldwide or nationwide, it doesn't always trickle down to Milpitas that much. And this one hit Milpitas like a ton of bricks. It hit all of California like a ton of bricks. But it's interesting having something really hit Milpitas. So
and
hold on.
There's a lot of our habits that have been affected, right? and through all of this, that I think that we can, this has allowed us to explore different avenues of working, of communicating, of you know everyday life that we might not have ever gotten the chance to, or might have pushed back off on. And I think that can be seen as a positive. Like now, I hope people will realize that that meeting could have been an email.
Yeah. Or wow, I can do my job from home. I don't need to show up at 8 a.m. to a desk every day.
Yeah, actually.
Well, yeah, that's actually another really interesting thing.
I mean, I think, yeah.
I think I'm wondering if there's going to be a lot of businesses that realize, like, oh, we don't need 5 buildings. Maybe we can just have 2 and have communal cubicles for people who need to come in, but everyone just kind of works from home. If they want to come in, they can, but we can like downscale. And I'm really wondering how many businesses are going to kind of transition over to that. And then, what economical impact that's going to have, because if every company starts having a much smaller footprint, then that'll be kind of troubling for economic development departments and planning departments.
Yeah. Well, it's part of changes of a growing urban city. That I think what all of this did, it just accelerated everything, right? Like at some point, the conversation would have been would get there. Working from home. I think working remotely, the less reliance on actual physical workers. That's already a trend, right? I think that if anything, this just made it more salient for everybody to recognize, and where that will take the future of the economy, I don't know. But at the end of the day, though, I think the response to all this, especially for the workers who don't have work that they can do immediately, the response has been relief, right? That some kind of aid to all of those workers in the form of financial relief. And it's the same premise of a universal basic income, which a lot of people in industries that have seen the shift from actual workers to autonomous workers, and or I'm sorry, autonomous technology and whatnot. They pitched universal basic income as something to rectify that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's funny is when Andrew Yang first came out, that he was running for president, and he kind of presented his universal basic income plan. A lot of people laughed at him, and now everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, Yang was right."
No, he had a point, and I think it really it's drawing bipartisan support now. So that's one takeaway that I think.
Well, I think some people from the Trump administration actually called him up and like studied his plan, and like met with him for like hours studying his plan. And that's one thing. That's another thing that this has done. If there's a silver lining, is people who would never work together have been working together lately. And if there's a silver lining, I think this kind of might lay ground for Congress actually working together again, because for so long they've been so left and right that they just won't even work with each other. And now they're actually working together. They still have hiccups, obviously, but they're working together. Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump have been working together and actually thanking each other, which is I've never seen that ever since Gavin Newsom got elected. I've never seen that either of them doing either of that. And whether you like Trump or not, it's times like these when you have to be able to work with your president. Uh, and I'm actually kind of happy to see that happening. And everyone should, whether you like Donald Trump or not. In a time of crisis, we need to come together and work together and get through it together.
Yeah, totally. This isn't a partisan thing, and it really shouldn't be. And it kind of surprises me sometimes, though, when people treat it as a partisan thing, as like, that this is Gavin's ban on our freedoms or whatnot, right? And they don't see that, this is also a part of a nationwide response, to control this, the spread. And then there are folks who, will question how dangerous this pandemic is, and the full extent that it actually affects them and whatnot. I don't know what else you need to see, right? Like, you see people dying, you see, people you care about being affected. So, I think at some point, I'm hoping that people will just realize that this is like a pretty big deal, and that it's not political here.
Yeah, I think by the time the people who haven't realized that yet realize it, we'll be mostly past it.
Yeah.
But I mean,
or they realize it by catching it, like, I think that that sometimes happens too. So.
Yeah, and it's not, I know a lot of people my age who just aren't worried about it. I mean, Gavin Newsom, I think yesterday or today, even referenced all the people at like Santa Cruz and LA who are still packing the beaches. And he was just like, it's time for you guys to grow up. Like, it's
no, seriously,
it's not gonna,
I agree.
It's probably not gonna affect you. Like, you're probably not gonna get sick from it, but those parents you live with, they will get sick, and people are dying. And the mortality rate is low, but if I, what do you know what the current mortality rate is? The percentage? I think it's like, was it 3 or 5%?
Amongst it varies amongst ages.
Well, let's just say 3%. Conservatively. If I handed you a bag of Skittles and I said, "Hey, 3% of these Skittles will kill you," you probably wouldn't open the bag of Skittles.
Right.
And that's one thing that people don't like realize is like it's dangerous. Like, it's, and it does.
I think that's how they convinced Trump to take this seriously. Like, hey, Mr. President, these M&Ms here. Yeah.
If you had a bag full of Big Macs,
just to illustrate,
3% of this will kill you. Would you touch the bag? Oh, I wouldn't touch the bag.
Yeah.
I need to get in the mood. I do a great Trump impression, but I need to get into the zone to do it. I'm not in the zone.
Yeah.
But anyways, well, moving on from this,
sure,
unless that I think we kind of covered most of that. So this is you're in your 4th year as a council member. So that means re-election's coming this November, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're
assuming that elections are still gonna, carry on as normal, and this thing doesn't spiral out of control.
I think if elections get postponed, then we need to worry.
Yeah.
But so you're running again. I see. I saw your Instagram. You kind of changed it there. So that's exciting. What's your reelection platform?
Um, I think that Milpitas
Milpitas
has
great.
been, yeah,
Sorry, no more
make
sharp
it,
jokes.
make it great again, make it greater. Milpitas is great, you know? And I think that it's time that we, really live up to the potential of that greatness. For the longest time, we have been in this phase of recovering from a different time, from a much uh, more complicated Milpitas, a much more um, a much less transparent Milpitas, a much less tolerant Milpitas. You know, we've recovered from that. I think that that recovery took time, um, and I didn't choose the cards that were dealt to me. Right when I came in, I knew that we had a lot of work to do, and we enacted a lot of government reforms. We have been through changing administrations, um, and rebuilding an administration from the ground up. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. It's something that you know up until recently did we finally are we finally able to say, hey, I think we finally got it now. And from there, I think that it's time to build on that confidence, that you go from I think we got it to we got this, and really instill that in our residents, in our workers, in our job creators, our employers, attracting new businesses, getting BART up and actually running,
Good luck.
all things to look forward to. And yeah, I'm hopeful that it'll be up and running this time around. And I'm hopeful that when it does get up and running, that it will be smooth. That I would hate for it to have any hiccups and whatnot, having been delayed for so long. So there's really no excuse when it opens.
Yeah. Well, at least now this year they have an excuse on why if it gets delayed again.
Yeah.
They have a we couldn't work on it for a couple months, and at least they would have an excuse this year. But
Yeah. But I mean, it's operations in general, I think have need a lot of reform to begin with. That this whole pandemic and whatnot, it came, after the fact that they had all these issues, right? Like the coronavirus didn't get a black guy arrested for eating, you know, a sandwich. That was BART, right? Um, and I think it's important that we take this time, this extra we have to really reflect on what we can do better. And I'm not just referring to BART and VTA. I'm talking about government as a whole. Right after we move back to, I guess, normalcy, this extra time that we have, I hope that we're able to really define where we want to go forward, and how we want to be as leaders, as government, going forward. Because I think for the first time, a lot of people are actually looking at people who work in government are really looking at the role of government. Because before, a lot of the time, government has been political, government has been bureaucracy, government has been policy. But for government to really, share in its obligation to serve the people, to care for its residents, I think that's what has been able to come out of this.
Yeah, well, one thing I have noticed, because I'm kind of an outsider, but not really, because I'm involved in the local government here.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is the city council seems smooth right now for the first time in a while. I feel like it was relatively smooth right after the
Thanks.
2018.
I moisturize.
That's exactly what I meant. But for real, I feel like the government, the city council, it ran pretty smooth for a while after the 2018 elections, and then going into 2019's towards the end, things just kind of got a little chaotic, and I mean between everyone. There's been some.
I mean, but even as chaotic as we see it these days, it's all relative, right? Like you compare it to things were, just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the politics were, so divisive, and that council members and the mayor, the administration, all clashed back then. I think nowadays you will always have the small town politics of that's it's very difficult to find a city in Silicon Valley that doesn't have its own politics. But when you look at it from a comparative perspective, and also when you compare it to the challenges of other cities, the issues that we're dealing with, they're relatively small, and they're all not that divisive. It's personality differences, maybe. It's a few political differences and whatnot. But I think for the most part, everybody knows that we have important work to do, and everybody tries really hard to move the needle. That even when we don't get what we want, us individually as council members, that we will compromise so that the meeting can go forward, and that we can get back to business. So I think that is all positive steps that we didn't have before, and I think that in time we will only get better. But right now we're doing pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, I definitely noticed a huge difference. There was a bit of shakeup, towards the end of last year, and kind of going into this year. There is a bit of shakeup and kind of some drama, and I feel like it's kind of smoothed out a bit. And you guys are working pretty effectively lately. I've watched the past few meetings, and back when the planning commission was really swamped, it's when I wasn't in a meeting, I didn't want to listen to one. And so I tuned out for like a couple months. We were dealing with I can't talk about what we were dealing with, but it was a big deal. That, and where everyone was involved. But after those two meetings, I kind of wanted to just tune out if I wasn't in a meeting. And so, but I listened to the last, I think, 3 city council meetings, and you guys work together. You guys are working together pretty well, and that's really cool to see. Because I just watched a recording of, I think it was one of the cities in Florida one of their city council meetings, and they're talking about COVID-19 and how one of the council members just thought they failed to act, like they could have closed the beaches, they could have done all this stuff, and he was just screaming at the top of his lungs. And personally, I didn't fault him for that, but because he was screaming because no one was listening, and then they called the meeting to recess and they just walked away, and I'm just like, I didn't do anything, leave me alone. And they just walked away. And and what you said, even the drama that Milpitas did have, is relative. It's nothing close to what other cities deal with sometimes. I mean, look at all the controversy in San Francisco right now with some of the bribes and all that. That's not happening in Milpitas.
It's not. Yeah, we have a lot to be thankful of.
Yeah. And surely, I work, with my position, I work with multiple people in multiple levels of the government, and different elected and officials, and different appointed officials, and different staff members. And there's really no one that I don't like working with. And I'm pretty sure that's something I could only say in Milpitas, which is really cool. But kind of talking about policy.
Sure.
So you ran a campaign recently, and one of your talking points was you mentioned wanting to take another look at CEQA. For people who don't know what CEQA is, it's a very long drawn out thing. It's a planning tool that kind of gives you some guidelines and regulations for environmental friendliness and some other stuff like that. But it's a planning tool for new development. But it's kind of been the standard for a really long time. And so you mentioned wanting to kind of relook at that. Is there a problem with it, or could just kind of explain a little bit on what you wanted to look at, rethink with that?
Yeah, sure. So, I think that climate change, the research on climate change has progressed significantly, in the decades since the passage of CEQA. The facts that were that folks use to make the case for CEQA, they were relevant then. They're still relevant now, but they're relevant now in a much different context. And I think that there will always be a need to have very high standards of environmental quality, of ensuring, clean energy to our communities, and really, reducing the carbon footprint and whatnot. However, it's not to say that this entire process, this entire framework, can't be improved upon. And I think that, it's due for reform, but it really needs to be overhauled.
Well, so
yeah.
I just looked up when CEQA was actually passed and implemented, and it's 1970.
1970.
Now, I'm sure there's been some amendments to it since then, but we're and that's why I'm asking you about this, because as a planner myself, on the planning commission, CEQA is kind of like our Bible. It's that's something we look at for almost every single project, most definitely every single large project. And
and that's why it's dangerous still. whenever you, you know a I guess if you look at it from this context, from this perspective, it's always dangerous when somebody holds up a Bible and claims everything um, based on that, um, because they disagree with something, right? So um, wars have been caused because of that, right?
True.
And you know, obviously, this is not necessarily the same thing, but a lot of people use CEQA as something that is well intentioned, right? Something that is meant to be. Um, I don't think it was meant to be political, and what CEQA ultimately did was it made these planning decisions more political than ever. It made it more, it was supposed to be objective decisions, but because um, of the level of interpretation that is needed to interpret CEQA, um, it puts the it puts the politics on the policymakers, the planners like us, when it really shouldn't. If it actually created objective standards that was clearly defined, that if you met these standards, um, you know, you wouldn't really have this kind of debate and whatnot. Then I think that would be much more productive in terms of community development. However, because of all these flaws and all these, I guess I see them as loopholes, because they're exploited. A lot of people exploit CEQA to drag out the planning process. A lot of people, um, you know, use it for purposes that are not related at all whatsoever to environmental quality.
Well, even if you updated CEQA, there's still going to be people who are going to do that. I mean,
there are. However, if you update it, but you place much more controls as to, if you are going to make a claim, then you are going to be legally responsible, legally liable for that claim. So
that's how it is right now.
No, not really. You can sue on CEQA, and if you lose, that's it. You lose. However, somebody's paying the legal bill, right? Typically speaking, when people, you know, get in these legal conflicts, they know that if if they can't back up their claim, they won't claim it because they can get sued for it, and they will have to pay the price for it. I think that's just fairness. Like without some kind of repercussions to all of this, then people can abuse the system and drag it out, and because they have nothing to lose. If they're bored enough, if they have the time, if they and honestly, if they're really passionate about something too, they have everything to gain sometimes by filing these CEQA lawsuits. I'm not advocating, to put consequences on everybody to make it more difficult for them to file CEQA lawsuits. No, that's not the case at all. It's just, if you make a claim, you better be able to back it up.
Well, yeah, being in planning and working in development for a while, I've kind of realized like there's a lot of developers that they just go in and they just do what they want and they just bankroll their way through it uh, because they have the money, and they know that if they win, then they'll make way
it's
more money
it's
than they
it's not as nuanced though, right? Like if that was the case, then I think that our entire um, judicial system, is broken, right?
well,
Like
like you said, no, there's loopholes though. There's a lot of
there
loopholes,
are,
and so you don't always go through the
but
court
developers,
system.
if they use those loopholes and whatnot, they can lose their business. They can go to jail. They can pay very hefty fines. So, yeah, maybe sometimes they will use a loophole or whatnot, because it's allowed, right? It doesn't. It's not to say that we shouldn't change those loopholes either. Like there are a lot of bad actors out there, right? And it in the development world and against the development world. What I'm trying to do is clean up the process to get rid of the bad actors on every side. Like there shouldn't be these loopholes in the first place, to make a claim, for a project or against a project. Like the whole thing shouldn't even be like focused so much on projects projects specifically. Like what it's forced, the planning process nowadays, it forced them focus to zone in at a micro level on projects, and because of that we're not able to really do long range planning from a multitude of planning um, initiatives as a whole.
Yeah, yeah, and I know what we're talking about is probably boring a good amount of people, uh, but it's actually really important. Long-term planning and just development as a whole completely shapes your entire city,
Yeah,
and it controls what you look at when you drive to work every single day. And it's actually really difficult for me to get people interested in the things I talk about when it comes to planning and development.
right.
But I still try because it's important. It's
Yeah,
certain decisions that the commission that I'm the vice chair of, the planning commission, the decisions we make like impact lives in Milpitas, like everyone's life in Milpitas. And it's when you really get into the details of why, people tend to tune out because it's a little bit on the boring side. But it's and that's why I'm enjoying this conversation so much, is because
yeah.
I honestly I didn't look up when CEQA was enacted until just now. I didn't know that until just now, but we're working off a framework that was implemented in the 70s, and like I'm sure there's been certain amendments to it here and there, but you know
Yeah.
it's
I
it's not like it's a
CEQA right now,
constitution.
you know, CEQA right now, it benefits those with nothing to lose, and also those with resources,
Yeah.
right? So if you are a big developer with a whole legal team ready, you know, and you have the finances and whatnot, to challenge uh, the challenges, right? To appeal the challenges, then you'll probably be fine in the long run. Like your project will get delayed, but it will likely still get built. Um, but for the you know small business owners that are looking to use their savings to um, start something new, to do their first project, um, to build on what their family left behind and leave something behind, uh, and not even just small businesses, even just everyday people who might be wanting to do a personal project for themselves. Sequa will still drag that out as well,
Well,
and the
yeah,
people in between. Yeah,
people who end up realizing that for them it's cheaper if they build a house instead of buying one.
yeah,
People run into Sequa issues all the time with
yeah.
that, and so and that's
They
why.
run into Sequa, and they run into these, anti development demagogues who, they don't care the extent of the development. They don't care who's building the project. They just don't want projects, right?
Well, there's that.
And yeah,
With another big issue that I've seen people run into is um, houses in general. And I'm going somewhere with this. Houses in
sure.
general have looked the same for at least 100 years, pretty much everywhere. Houses have just kind of looked the same. And then, what I realized from what I've been witnessing lately is when a developer comes in, or not even a developer, just a person who wants to build their own house, and they hire an architect to design it, and they come up with a very modern looking design,
Mhm.
that looks nothing like any of the other houses in the neighborhood. Oftentimes they're shut down because,
Mhm.
uh,
It
part
doesn't
of,
conform.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And that's a huge part of the approval process,
yeah. That
for
is made
us. And
possible by Sequel.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And CEQA, the general plan, and any specific plan that they might fall under. But yeah, it
yeah,
it if it doesn't conform, it's likely to get denied. And so
yeah.
it
But the thing is
creates
that
this.
conformity, right, is
Mhm.
you, it's hard to be objective, right? Like the notion of conformity, it should be objective, right? It should just be like, hey, if it doesn't, like, kill you, you know, um, and doesn't really hurt anybody, um, hey, it's your money, right? You if you want to build an ugly project, go for it, right? But that's on you. That's not what I'm advocating for, by the way. But um, you know, the the whole notion that, like, we are going to tell you um, how your project should look like aesthetically, that's not an objective standard, so people don't want to take the risks, or they're too afraid to take the risks, if because if the moment that they do, you know like you said, it can be shut down. It likely will get shut down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it creates this weird chain reaction to where if this keeps going, houses are going to just look the same for another 300 years, if it keeps going like this. Um,
Yeah,
but an interesting thing about conformity is everyone looks at, does it conform? They look at it to what's surrounding it, but no one ever kind of thinks of, like, oh, does this conform to what we want it to look like in 30 years? Or it could be
right.
neighborhood, or it could be a shopping center, or it could be anything. I mean, in Milpitas, we actually did have some of that forward thinking on Main Street. Um,
Mhm.
a developer came to us and they wanted an amendment on a setback rule so they could have their storefront directly on the sidewalk instead of a parking lot
Right,
or a couple spaces in front of it. And we were just like, this is the future of what Main Street is going to look like. Yeah, we'll give you the amendment,
right,
because this is kind of what we want to move forward. And you don't often see that kind of forward thinking in
right,
government. A lot of government and even planning is like, what's happening right now and what are the fires we need to put out, and what happened yesterday that we still need to deal with. It's not often that you think about tomorrow, next year, next 10 years. And it would be really nice to see a little bit more forward thinking, but we kind of did stray pretty far off changing Sequel, but it was very interesting.
Sequel does that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, yeah. If you want a conversation starter, right?
That's the essence.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of get everywhere from that, and it's a very important document that.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of people don't know a lot about CEQA and the regulations in it, and that's why it's important for people like you to pick planning commissioners who either know what they're talking about or are willing to learn what they're talking about, but they kind of have a knack for it, already. I think right now our planning commission is pretty solid. I really respect everyone who sits up on the dais with me. But I'll look at some other cities, and you don't really see the same. And there's some cities in California where the city council is the planning commission, then they just get overly slammed. They just get just jam packed with work. But it's important to pick good planning.
Yeah, and thank you for volunteering your time on the planning commission. For those who don't know, Tim is the vice chair of the planning commission, and it's a lot of work, and we do need good people to serve, and you're definitely among the brightest, and really help us shine. So thank you, Tim.
Well, trust me, it's my pleasure. It's actually a ton of fun being up there.
Yeah.
What's interesting about being the vice chair is it's kind of I don't have the stress and responsibility of the chair, but whenever he has to recuse himself or he's not there that day, I get to have all the fun.
Yeah.
Being the chair of the meeting. I've got to do that once so far, and it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
But well, we've been going for quite a while. I'm probably going to cut it off.
Okay. Yeah.
But when we are no longer living through a shelter-in-place rule, you will definitely be on the in-person podcast. I think that'll be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But so, anyways, well, good luck for campaigning. You're going to have a very, very interesting campaigning experience this year with what's going on.
Yeah, I honestly, I haven't even thought too much about the elections, to be quite honest. I think that what's on my mind and on my colleagues' mind is sitting and to make sure that people aren't dying, right? And I for the next few months what I'm gonna be focused on. Yeah. Well, and because elections come and go, right?
Yeah.
But I think that we all need the support right now, the residents, and we all need government to function. So.
Yeah. Well, you guys are working ridiculously hard. It's easy to see that with the people who are vocal on Facebook, but as someone who has my eyes are on the inside of what's going on, I see every council member putting in way more time than they normally would to try and deal with this, and try and create the best outcome that they possibly can from this situation that, frankly, not a lot of people were prepared for. After the Spanish flu, people didn't really think something like this would happen again. And frankly, so many zombie movies have been made that's freaking everyone out.
Yeah.
But you guys are working really hard. Actually, my commission got off easy. we have our meetings canceled until the end of April. And so,
Oh,
yeah, but I've been trying,
yeah,
I've been in talks with people and trying to do what I can to help, because I have some free time lately, but I've been trying to do what I can, just to help. And so obviously if there's
yeah,
anything you can think of that I can help, just feel free to let me know. But,
yeah.
when this is over, we'll get you in a real podcast, not over the glitchy network, and we'll
It's fine.
and we can talk about sequel for another 5 hours.
Yeah, and I look forward to those brighter days, right?
Yeah,
And I think that there is a lot of good, like we discussed, that came out of this. You know, men are washing their hands now, right?
it took a global pandemic.
So women and the rest of the world, you're welcome, I guess.
All it took was a global pandemic.
Yeah, and I hope after all this we can return to using normal supplies of toilet paper, because apparently this whole thing has caused us to burn through rolls of toilet paper.
I don't think anyone really understands that. That's just weird.
It is. Like you're sitting in a room and you're probably thinking, oh, what will I do? They're in this room with a shower.
Yeah. Or at the very least, get a bidet. They're weird.
Right.
It's a great backup option. Okay. Enough toilet humor.
enough toilet humor. Yeah.
Quite literally. All right. Well, I'll catch you next time, Anthony. Thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. All right. Take care.
Take care.